Well, I'm sure everyone knew that one. That was the most famous lute song in the late 1500s in England. So I'm sure that one was probably well trotted, right? So I guess we'll wait a few minutes. We're missing a few people. Let's see, Lauren and Alexandria, and who else are we missing? Khalil's here, Simone's here, Maddie's here, Dominique's here, Olivia, Andy. Who am I missing? Lauren, Alexandria, and
Avery.
Avery, that's it. Yep. We'll wait a few minutes. Said Andy's looking good. That's
Yeah.
So.
Very professional.
Yeah. What kind of tie you have on, Andy?
Actually, soccer.
Oh, of course. That's beautiful.
Do you like to dress up for games, or you get your suit on like all the European clubs? The coaches are all.
I'm a tracksuit, warm-up type of guy.
No, you have to dress the part, Andy. It's got to be all business, right? Well, like I said, we'll give a minute or two. Let's see. I see if I can find my. Let's see. I found a good article this weekend that I'll have to see if I can find. I sent to Dr. Loudon Haynes. Let's see if I can find it again, just to start us off, give us something to think about. Let's see, on Haynes. Info. Where this would be, Isaacson.
Isaacson was on the MSNBC. There probably a rerun last night at 2:45 talking about the pandemic.
Yeah, I've seen him. He's kind of made the rounds in some of the morning shows and things. It's kind of interesting that they're asking him his idea and his perspective on things. But I think because of his background studying scientists, I think that's why they invited him on. Here's what I found recently. So the animal science pre-vet people, where are you at? How much DNA analysis have you done on the animals at the farm? Lots? Not very little, right? So this was kind of an interesting. Dr. Loudon Haynes was familiar with this technique. apparently to clean up these old manuscripts, they will literally take erasers to them.
But it's a special
Yeah.
eraser. It's a Mars Statler, and it's a plastic white eraser. It's
Mhm.
not an ordinary eraser.
So there were archaeologists think they were interested in learning more about how these manuscripts were made, specifically the binding, the outside, the covers, and they knew they would be made out of, animal skin, like leather or cows, things like that. But they wanted to kind of understand, well, what type of cows? Was it the same cow? Was it different cows? What? So they wanted to sample the DNA or take samples from the cover, and of course they wouldn't allow them to do that. It's a destructive technique. So after what, it was interesting because then what they did is they just kind of watched the curators, like how did they actually handle the manuscripts? How did they actually try to attempt to clean them up? And so they noticed that there was a technique, like they used these special erasers. And so they said they could use sort of the, I don't know, like sort of the debris from the eraser, and there was enough DNA on the erasers to be able to analyze the parchment and things like that. So they said that there was all sorts of other things on there. I guess apparently part of this particular book, they call it the York Gospels, and from the UK. You ever heard of it, Andy? No, no, I haven't read that one. Well, apparently it's like all these holy men would take oaths on this text. So they would be, like it says up here, clergymen who kissed the pages over centuries. So they were able to find bacteria and DNA from all these priests from over the years. But they also said they found DNA from cow and sheep whose skin became the parchment of the book, things like that. So I think they figured out, it was interesting because when they went down, they studied the animals, the York Gospels. They said that they looked at the sex of the calves, and they found 4 of the 5 sex they determined were actually female, which they thought, well, that would be unusual because they were valuable. They would provide, the female cows obviously provide the calves, and they provide milk and things. So why would they kill so many females to make parchment like this? And they sort of actually, they went to a zoo archaeologist. So there you go. If you need a career path, there's another option for the animal science people. They said there was a cattle plague that swept through England a few years before, and so they sort of said perhaps they had so many dead cows that they might as well salvage them, make something out of them. Or they thought about that because this was such an important book, that maybe it was symbolic. They were sacrificing these very valuable female calves to make the book. So it was very interesting. Again, they talked about that scientists alone can't make sense of it. They need historians, they need literary scholars, they need archaeologists to help interpret findings. So I thought that was a neat overlap or interface between scientists and sort of the folks in the arts and humanities as well. So I was inspired to go look at some ancient DNA, but it had it all, right? I told Dr. Lawson, it's got it all, right? It's got DNA analysis, it's got manuscripts, it's got cow plagues, it's got everything we're interested
Art
in.
supplies.
Yeah, art supplies, yeah, how you clean manuscripts and things like that. So I thought that was an interesting application. Well, anyway, we'll see if I see Lauren join us. Hello, Lauren, how are you? Doing good? So we'll go ahead, and I guess we'll get started, and we'll see if Avery and Alexandria can join us. But first on the list is Andy. Andy, are you ready to go? He was born ready, I think is what he mouthed.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, okay. Well, you can go ahead, like you said, and I will change the settings. I'll let everyone be able to share screen, so you can go ahead and get started, and we'll kind of work our way through.
Okay, so my presentation is entitled The Sports Coach, Artist or Scientist, but it's actually a little bit of a misleading title because I'm going to tell you right up front that the sports coach is an artist, but my contention would be that he or she would be more successful if they incorporated science into their art. Here's the Mona Lisa. Everyone's seen this painting, perhaps the most famous painting in the world by Leonardo da Vinci. What many people don't know, that even though Leonardo was considered a great painter, he dissected cadavers, over 30 cadavers in his lifetime, and he used that information that he discovered about the human body to inform his art. He was into optics. He studied optics. He figured out how light works, how shadows are cast. He studied geometry. He knew that he could reproduce 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional surface with the way he incorporated his geometry into his painting, and also used perspective in that regard. Studied botany informally, knew about plants, knew about trees and shrubs. Studied hydraulics, understood how water moved, how it refracted, how it reflected. So over a lifetime of informal study, he understood that science informs art. And although he was a great artist in his own right, I think the fact that he was a great scientist made him perhaps the greatest painter of all time. Which brings me on to the sports coach, you know, football, baseball, soccer, track and field. The sports coach is an artist, I think, in the broadest sense, in that somebody who creates challenging environments for their athletes, manages people, helps them become the best people that they can be, inspires them, motivates them, makes subjective decisions. Here's the definition by Vaughan of what coaching, the art of coaching, is all about, and it's all very somewhat subjective. My premise is that, you know, with science, the coach could be, as an artist, could be a lot more effective. Just to show that the coach is an artist, is the, you know, the kind of career pathway, if you like, of a coach. You don't need a license, you don't need a degree. There isn't a degree in coaching in order to become a coach. There isn't a body of knowledge to become a coach. When I say a body of knowledge, what I mean is if you're a doctor or a lawyer, you have to have a certain amount of information acquired before you then specialize to become a gynecologist, for example, or a criminal defense lawyer. There isn't anything like that in the educational, in the sports coaching world. If there is any formal education, it would be physical education. But even within the education realm, PE is kind of a subculture unto itself, where coaches are taught by other coaches, and so the values of that subculture are kind of reinforced. It seems that most coaches become coaches through experience. In other words, they've often played their sport, and then they become coaches and teach the sport after having played the sport themselves. Nash came up with this concept of tacit knowledge, and the way this works is that he cites an example of the 2006 World Cup, the Soccer World Cup. Germany was playing Poland. The game was tied, and Jürgen Klinsmann, the coach of Germany, brought on a substitute. And a few minutes after the substitute came on, Germany scored, won the game, ended up getting to the semi-finals of the World Cup. And Nash tried to look at that decision and figure out, well, how did Klinsmann make that decision? What is the objective reason that he made it? Why did it work? And he couldn't really figure it out. He thought, well, maybe it was luck, but he kind of dismissed that idea. And he came up with his concepts of tacit knowledge, which is basically all Klinsmann's experiences leading up to that point that allowed him to make that decision. He looked back in time at all those experiences and picked out the right decision to make. And this is what he called tacit knowledge, and really is the way that most coaches today do their coaching. Sports science has become very widespread, especially over the last few decades in the coaching world. So these are areas that can improve individual performance, team performance. So things like sports psychology, nutrition, biofeedback, where athletes are hooked up to electrodes which can give you information on pulse rate, heart rate, and things like that. Here's a definition of science from Vaughan, the same guy that defined art for you a few minutes ago. So what we can see is we're talking about methods, tools, technology, prediction, control, very sort of objective concepts. If we compare that with Vaughan's definition of art, we can see that it's kind of the opposite. It's about order, prediction, control, intangibles. The bottom line is that maybe because of this, coaches are somewhat resistant to using science in their art. Number of reasons for it, but the main reason is one of comprehension. There was a study done in 2019 in South Africa which showed that there was a lot of sports science information out there which could be very valuable in regard to coaching, but the coaches weren't accessing it. And the main reason was because they didn't understand the information, and it was a two-pronged problem. Firstly, the sports scientists presented that information in a sort of a format that wasn't really digestible by the coaches. It was a lot of science jargon used in the data, and then on the other hand, the coaches don't really have the scientific background to understand the material enough to apply it into their coaching. So it seems that the two sides need to come together a little bit, but specifically with the coaching side, the coaches need to have a little bit more scientific background in order to improve their coaching. Well, at the end of the day, does it really matter if coaches don't embrace science? And at the elite levels, and we're talking, Division 1 football, Division 2 college basketball, professional sports, it probably doesn't matter anyway, because at that level there's a lot of money involved, and when there's a lot of money involved, you can employ specialists. So, for example, the Women's World Cup soccer team that won the World Cup last year, 2019, they had a sports psychologist on staff. They had a strength and conditioning coach. They had a nutritionist. So at that level, you're going to have specialists in the area, so you don't really need to have a well-rounded coach. But I would suggest that at the youth and the lower levels, this is where you just have one coach, or maybe if you're lucky, an assistant coach. The coach is everything. So if they're just an artist and they're not a scientist as well, they're not bringing science into their coaching, then they're kind of shortchanging their players and their teams, and they're going to be overall less successful. So to kind of sum everything up, the modern sports coach can always lean on their experience, their instinct, their tuition to make their decisions and to perform their coaching. So a coach can feel or think that a player isn't working hard enough, for example. If we add that scientific knowledge, if we study outside our sport, then we can definitely improve the outcome. That same player that the coach felt was not working hard enough, we can do video analysis and show them that they weren't working hard enough. We can hook them up to a heart rate monitor and show them that they weren't working hard enough at certain points in the game. We can then come up with a prescriptive training program based on science to improve that player. Maybe use sports psychology to motivate them, to give them the confidence to know that they are going to improve if they follow that program. So the bottom line is I think it's incumbent on coaches to study as much as they can outside the art of coaching, so that they can become much better at the science of coaching, and then apply that to their coaching, which is going to mean that they are going to become much more effective. Their teams are going to be much more successful. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, first of all, let's thank our speaker again via the best way we know how, emojis. Yay. Questions for our speaker? I guess
Or comments?
Yeah, I could say one thing. What do you, I mean, you've probably, Andy, followed, I mean, a sport like baseball that's very statistical and metrics driven and things like that. What's your opinion of this, the emphasis and the movement towards Moneyball and towards letting the statisticians make a lot of the decisions, especially on drafting players or making substitutions or how players should hit or how you should approach the game? Do you think that that's that sort of a movement towards statistical driven athletics, especially in those types of sports that are very they naturally lend themselves to data analysis? Do you think that's a good thing in terms of sports, or do you think it's taking away some of the allure of the game or the way the game was intended to be played?
Well, I think you can, there's still a place for the art, you know, the gut feeling, the hunch, that type of thing, the human element. But I think if you use analytics, and it's kind of cyclical as well, because I think some teams in baseball and football especially are kind of now going away from the analytics again, because they're, after a few years of seeing what happens with analytics, they decide, you know what, it's not particularly perfect anyway. Let's throw the human element back into it. But I think there's definitely a place for both. You know, you definitely want the science, you definitely want the data, because then you can be a little bit more objective. And then it's a question of how much subjectivity do you throw in there? How much opinion do you throw in? How much of the human element? So I think there's definitely a place for both. But I think at the top levels, when you're talking about millions of dollars at stake, you want to kind of, you know, turn over every stone to get the most successful team or most successful players that you can. So that's where, you know, the science stuff has got to come into it. So I think there's a place for both, bottom line.
And Andy, wouldn't there be a big difference between a coach at a collegiate level or professional level and a coach who would be nurturing young players? Isn't there a personality? They don't need the scientific background. They don't need all of the analytics. They don't need that. They're just nurturing young minds to be team players. Where does it become something that moves into something more aggressive? Is it at the junior high level or high school, or does it wait till students get much older into their collegiate career?
Well, I think you can do it at any level. I think you know, you can just be a pure humanist, know nothing about sports, and you could, as you say, nurture someone from a personal level to make them the best soccer player they can be, the best football player they can be, the best basketball player they can be. You don't have to have a knowledge of a sport to do that, and that could be the same at the top level. You know, you could be nurturing a player who knows how to play the sport, who is a great athlete, but they just need the human side of things. Then on the other hand, you could get someone at a really low level who, you know, he doesn't really, or he or she doesn't need the human element. They need maybe more technical, scientific advice to improve their techniques. So I don't think the level necessarily matters. I mean, I think if you look at coaches, you know, some coaches, they're very good on the artistic side, the human side of things. Others are more technical. Others are the, you know, it's my way or the highway. This is the way you're going to do it. Very structured. So there's lots of different ways to get to the end game, I guess.
Thank you for that. And then just one follow-up. So at the Big Ten level, the coaches have to win, or they move on,
right,
or they're asked to move on.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's at any level, Marie. Andy's got to win too, right?
Yeah, we all do. But you're right, at a certain level, when you're talking about millions of dollars, you know, the Big Ten, for example, you know, I would think if you're a coach at that level, you're going to be given a lot of resources, and I think you want to access those resources as much as you can. So, you know, a Division One basketball program in the Big Ten is going to have, you know, a sports psychologist on staff. They're going to have nutritionists. They're going to have kind of kinesiologists, et cetera, et cetera. So there's, you know, you don't really get an excuse at that level. You've got specialists that are going to do the job because it costs money. And you're right. The coach is going to be the one that loses their job first, and you know, maybe they keep the sports psychologist and the nutritionist around, but the coach is going to be the one that loses their job.
I think it's interesting. I think you kind of hit on that could there be a study on how much do you need to worry about the technical side versus the human side? That's kind of what we're getting to. And you do see differences at different levels. I always find it interesting to watch, like, for example, a very successful collegiate basketball coaches that try to go to the professional level and they don't do well. And they don't. It's very rare that a coach can do that. And maybe a lot of that has to do with what do the players need? And does the coach understand that? Like the coach from Michigan, Beheim, he's the guy that he was very successful at Michigan, and then he went to play for the Cavs. Horrible. He didn't have any rapport with the players. It didn't work out. He left midway through the season. So it's just very interesting to see. Maybe there's a dynamic there. How much technical, you know, maybe when you get to that level, the NBA players, they know how to play. They don't need a lot of technical help. It's about building trust and rapport, and that's more of the art side, the psychology side, or the relationship side than really technical know-how. So, interesting.
Probably at that level, it's probably more man management. You don't need to be able to teach technique. You know, they've all got the technique. It's a question of managing personalities. And again, at the top level, it's probably more you don't have to know or understand the sport particularly well, because you can get assistants to do that part of it. You as the coach probably have to manage the personalities on your team more than actually coach them.
Well, keep that in mind when you leave us for the Premier League, when you get called up, you know, that they know how to play, Andy, okay? So
thanks for that advice.
And I would buy a suit too. I'd wear a suit on the pitch. You're out on the pitch, get your suit.
I've got the tie at least.
Okay, that's right. That's a good start, right? So don't forget us when you hit the big time, okay? So very good. Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions for our speaker? All right. Well, let's see. Thank you very much. So,
set the bar pretty high, Andy.
Yeah, Andy's pretty good, and that tie too. He's got a pretty good tie on, so that's going to be tough. Next on the list is Dominique. Dominique, are you there?
I am here. Give me 1 second.
Sure.
Good morning.
Okay. Hi. Okay. All righty. Let's get the screen share thing going.
Is that a UF sweatshirt?
It is. It's
Wow.
a cardigan, a UF cardigan. So, yes.
Man, I think maybe Dominique did one up Andy.
If you see me keep turning my head to the left, it's because I got dual monitors and the camera is on my presentation screen and you guys are on my left screen, so that's why. So just a little explanation there. Okay, let's see here. Let me get this going. And oh, that's the text box. Sorry. Okay. Can you guys see that full screen? Yay, nay. Yes, okay, thank you. All right. So today we're going to discover how a museum can be a perfect place to see both art and science. working in harmony with one another, specifically taking a deep dive into the work of exhibit staging. We'll be looking into the design process and the science that goes into creating a viewing experience that sparks both emotion and thought. So for this talk, I'm actually going to be utilizing the Field Museum as my example, and specifically the exhibit called the Underground Adventure. A lot of these photos that you guys are going to see are actually my own personal photos from 2006 when I visited the museum. I found them, so I was really excited about that. I decided not to go with the PowerPoint presentation because I wanted you guys to just kind of focus on the image and kind of be a little bit immersed as if you were there yourselves. So enjoy these photos of me from 2006 because I was a preteen. So anyway, I wanted to start off by explaining that the American Museum of Natural Science was actually one of the first large museums in the country to adopt the concept of a permanent large-scale habitat exhibits. And by habitat exhibit, I mean basically staging the environment. A lot of times it was used with taxidermy animals or with taking some kind of resin and like taking fish and stuff and like putting them in a resin so that they would be completely preserved as if you took a photo of like a picture of water with fish moving in it without them decomposing. So it's basically being able to put a creature within their own environment, making it a very immersive experience. Now, this started back in 1921. And in 1921, you know, they started using this method and it had become a success. And all large museums started following suit. Now, you'll notice that a lot of small museums to this day don't utilize a lot of these permanent large exhibits, and that's because they constantly have rotating exhibits that come from these larger museums like the Field Museum, like the Natural Science Museum. But I like to call them home museums or base museums where they have the space to install these permanent exhibits where people can continue to see these for generations. I was actually able to do some more digging in regards to the Field Museum, and I was so lucky I actually found an academic paper. I was like, yes. So I uncovered that, or discovered, I don't know, word vomit there. The Underground Adventure actually opened at the Field Museum in March of 1999, which I did not know. And research began in 1996, which is actually a relatively short time period between 96 and 99, because normally museums in the past took anywhere between 6 to 10 years to create. It was normally about 5 to 6 years worth of planning and then another 5 or so years to actually create it because they had to make all of the parts from hand. And especially since the Field Museum decided to do a very immersive experience that involved models, sculptures, specimens, and animatronics. This is one of the first museums to utilize the concept of animatronics in a permanent style exhibit. Now, the concept of this exhibit was like you would get shrunk down to 1/100th of your size. So you would walk into this room and it was like you were in a laboratory and it was like this it was very theatrical. And you were being shrunk down to a 1/100th size, and you were going to be stuck underground with a world of insects and what is life like for those insects in an underground world. Can you see the next image? Okay, cool. Just making sure that it's changing. Okay, so this is stepping off of the machine that shrinks you down to that size. Now these, the ones that, I think there's only one image in here that's actually not mine. Other than that, these are all my images that I actually took these as a little kid with the camera. As you can see, there are a lot of components in this image. So coming off of the quote unquote rig, you can already start to see this very large, can you see my mouse moving out of curiosity? Okay, cool. You can see this very large creature and you're like, whoa, what is that? And what's even cooler is these little doodads. I am no science expert, so I'm gonna call it a doodad. We're moving. So as a kid, that kind of freaked me out because like I'm still arachnophobic. Like I don't do spiders and bugs and creatures like that. So it was like a little horror show for me. But at the same time, it was really interesting because like if you read the signs, it explains what they are and it makes it a lot less scary, especially for a child going through this of exhibit. You can see roots coming off. You can see different bugs and insects that these wouldn't even be visible to the naked eye. So you're on a microscopic level on top of that. So you're able to see things as if a scientist would be viewing them through a microscope, but like on a level you can understand, which I thought was like super interesting. Now, the fact that they put so many of these things into this exhibit was like, it was crazy. And it cost them $12 million to produce all of this. So that's a lot of money. This exhibit is super large scale. It covers 15,000 square feet and is actually still one of like the most major exhibits that the Field Museum has today. And let's see here. What do I got next? Aha, here we go. Yay. Here's Mini-Me and my brother. So this is actually a penny. And this is to help show a representation of what would a penny look like underground. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but they changed the penny. It says, "In soil we trust," which I thought was really cool and creative. But you can touch it and it feels metal. It's cool to the touch. There's sounds around you. It's such an immersive experience when it comes to being in this exhibit. I mean, you're not just looking at things behind glass. These are things you can touch. These are things you can feel textures to. They move. And in 2006, I went to visit this museum. So, I mean, if you think about it, the museum began planning in 1996. My little brother next to me was born in 1996. So if that helps kind of put it into words I can't come up with right now. Perspective, there we go. So he was born in 96, and that's when the planning of this museum began. So 10 years later, you know, we're there as a family enjoying this amazing experience. There were a lot of objects and components put into this. So it wasn't just the research that went behind it. You know, there were scientists, whatever the name is for the scientist that, you know, does research on bugs. There were artists, there were sculptures, there were engineers because of the animatronics. This particular animatronic, the tail would move and the little doodads would like pinch. You could see that there were eggs and the nest and all of these things put it on a level, because like, you know, when you see it in real life, you're seeing it as if like, oh, they're just like teeny microscopic little white dots. Etymologist, aha, there we go. And so like, you're like, oh, these things produce actual eggs. Like you're seeing them like they look like a chicken egg to you. Like as a kid, that's like, you're able to make and connect those dots. And this was part of like when they were planning it, they really wanted something to be immersive. So you could take the science behind it and understand it in a way that would resonate with you, whether you were an adult or a child. You didn't have to have any background knowledge on this, but you would walk away with a totally different understanding from when you first walked in. So here's that big creepy spider. This thing moved and scared the crap out of me. I did not like it. It was fuzzy, and I don't like spiders. I still don't like it. I still find it creepy. But this is actually one of the most iconic parts of this entire experience. Is this giant, this giant warm and fuzzy spider, and people loved it. I mean, it was, you put it on a level and it was something out of a nightmare, but at the same time, you know, there's a plaque in front of it explaining, hey, this is it eating food. This is how it survives. This is how it would burrow itself in the dirt. And as you can see, like all of these roots and stuff coming down, you can see, you know, the coloring and stuff. A painter had to go in and hand paint all of this. A scientist had to go in and do the research on what this thing looked like, make it 100 times its original size, and be able to come up with directions to give an artist to say, hey, create this in a realistic concept. This thing has fur. How would we go about making it scientifically realistic? And that was something that they strived to do with the technology they had in the early 90s. And this thing is still going strong today. Like, this is not something that they've constantly been redesigning. They decided to stay with the original design. It was reevaluated around 2002 And turns out that the people who went through and did all the evaluations and stuff were like, hey, it's still up to par and it's still doing pretty good. So people were very excited about that. This is an ant, which was kind of interesting to see, because if you look really closely, you can see these little hairs coming off of its butt. I'm not a scientist. I'm sorry. Okay, so and that's really cool because you're able to see it on such a detail that like your brain is like, wow, this is amazing. And then we have, here's my little brother. But again, it's a very interactive experience. You know, you're able to touch things and you're able to just really take a look at what is under the earth around you. And a lot of these insects and bugs, everything that was shown was something that would be underground in like the Chicago area or in the state of Illinois. So it was all like local stuff. It's not like they went and took a spider from Australia and was like, hey, here's a cool huntsman spider and we're just going to stick it underground and stuff. No, they kept it very, very scientifically realistic, which I thought was just really cool. And overall, it just became a really amazing full sensory experience. So from being able to touch things to the sights, to the sounds, because they had sounds and sometimes they had subwoofers going. So when there was like the spider was moving or something, the ground, like it would feel like the ground was rumbling because of the level of sound and vibrations. And it was very interactive. They had a lot of different places where you had photo opportunities, you know, being able to come out of a yeah, basically like when a bug sheds its skin or whatever, you know, you're able to climb inside and take cool pictures. So that makes it very family friendly and very interactive with the entire family as well. This was a very memorable experience for both me and my family. It's literally the only exhibit I've ever been able to remember out of all the museums my family has taken me to, which is why I decided to present it to you guys. And then on top of that, like, it's cool. It's really cool. And it is I feel like this exhibit is like the perfect breeding ground to be able to explain to you guys the concept of taking that research and taking that science and taking artists. And literally there's like 5 or 6 people saying, let's take hundreds of people together and create this really cool moment in time that people can walk through for generations to come. So yeah, that's kind of all I got for you guys. So
Thank you. Oh, sorry, I forgot. We need to make sure that we need to keep our manners here.
Yes,
Let's
absolutely.
clap. Hey, how'd you do that? Olivia got to change the color on her clapping hand. Oh, she knows some secrets here about that. Anyway, so what questions do you have for our speaker?
Or comments.
Comments.
yeah.
I can imagine there's probably a lot of people that they would not be real enthused about going through that immersive experience.
And there was in the 2002 study that they did, they followed a bunch of different groups of people of different various ages and stuff throughout the a certain X amount of time. And basically what they did is they took those people's opinions on the experience. You know, like someone who's maybe 5 years or younger walking through this, it could be terribly frightening to a really young child who can't read or who can't understand it. So like depending on the mentality of the child, like it could be a horrifying experience that would literally like scar them for life. But for the most part, it does do what a lot of people want it to do, which is be able to get that educational layout basically for them to be able to start that conversation with them. Now, another concern too was people who are claustrophobic. When you're going through the shrinking machine, it's kind of a tight space. It's a single file line that you guys are kind of walking through. Things are flashing. So people who have seizure sensitivities and stuff, they actually have a secondary entrance for those who have like issues. So you do miss out a little bit of the experience because of that. But at the same time, you know, they try to work around people who do have like medical problems and things like that. And if there is things that are frightening to a young child, you know, you can always like have them close their eyes and we'll walk right past it kind of thing. But they felt that even though there are flaws to it per se, that the benefits outweighed that significantly. And not just on an educational point of view, but also from a money profit point of view, because this is one of their heavy hitters, because you have to pay extra to go through this exhibit.
Well, it does make me think about what sort of the conversation that Dr. Samad was having us talk about and think through, like what are all the things that you actually need to do to properly do an installation. So, and hopefully everyone enjoyed that conversation and to think about that, the materials and the lighting and the positioning and the atmosphere and things like, and the space and all that. And then I can imagine that would be multiplied many fold with something like this.
Well, and the fact that they did it between 1996 and 1999, because it opened in March of 1999. So the fact that they were able to go from planning, from putting it on paper to having, people walking through the front doors in that short amount of time meant that they had hundreds of people on staff working round the clock to get this completed. Because all of the other exhibits that I had done some research on and stuff, it took years to complete. Like, this wasn't something that popped up overnight. And even if they had part of the exhibit done, it may not have been 100% yet, but they still kind of sort of opened it up like a mini opening to the public, but they were still working on getting it completed. So it's just a lot that goes into most of these exhibits, and it's very impressive. And I was just like I said, this one just burned itself into my brain, and I was like, I'm going to present on this. I have photos. Make it a little more personal.
You had scientific data to support that, the academic paper that you found. I know that was a treasure when you found that, because you mentioned it
yes.
last time you visited, that you were looking for something like that.
Yeah.
You also mentioned of all the museums, this one is the one that really connected with you. And part of that can be, of course, because of your age. But I think you hit on something that a lot of museums might want to think about doing. For you and for the other guests and the museum goers, it was a full sensory experience. So you're not just walking through the galleries and looking at the art of the Dutch of the 17th century or the Italians, but you're engaging with it. You become part of it. The Toledo Museum had an exhibition about a year ago, and it involved music for various pieces. Remember, you can play information and see the picture. That
was there in the fall, I think. Yeah,
it was. But this takes it to a greater step, involving all the people, even the psychologists who came on board to identify the needs of the people who might be coming through it. That's involving all the sciences and all the artists and all the technology coming together. I've not seen this, but I'm ready to go to Chicago. Take a look.
It's a wonderful exhibit, and the exhibit itself is huge, just the exhibit, and the museum is like a whole nother ballpark. Like, it could take like a day to 2 days just to go through the entire museum itself. I remember my family, when we were there, we could not actually see everything. We were lucky enough that we had city passes, which gives us like access to like the Shedd Aquarium and the Science Museum and stuff as well, that's in Chicago. And that actually gave us our tickets to go to the underground experience adventure, which is why we hit that up first in the museum. And then they're also known for their Sue, who is their T-Rex that's literally right there when you first walk in. So there's a lot in there. There's a lot of permanent exhibits, but then there are a lot of temporary exhibits that are also on that immersive level. Like, I think they had a King Tut exhibit when I was there as well. We didn't have tickets to go inside that one, but that one was not a permanent exhibit, but it was immersive, very similar to the Underground Adventure. It just didn't have the animatronics and things like that. That would be a little harder to make, what's the word? Traveling, like a traveling circus, but it's a traveling museum exhibit. So
nicely done.
Start over and redo their presentation.
Other thoughts?
Everyone has to say, Andy, sorry, you have to redo. No, I'm just kidding. That's why we videotape this. So anyway, any other questions or comments? All right. Well, let's thank our speaker again, and we will go ahead and move on into our next presenter. I have Khalil next. Khalil, are
Yeah.
you ready?
Yeah, let me get to my desk real quick.
Sure.
This will probably be our last one this morning.
We'll see how long it goes, I guess. Maybe the last one, I guess.
By the time we chat, perhaps.
Maybe, I don't know. Can you believe that? We're taking longer than we thought.
It's because they're so good.
Yeah, that's good. Good thing to have. So,
Yeah.
problem to have. So, anyway, Khalil, whenever you're ready.
Yep. One second. Alrighty. I think I'm good to go. So, today I'll be talking about the interface of art and science, specifically as it relates to farming. So, I'm going to start off a little bit with about the history of agriculture and specifically farming. So, farming is believed to have begun around 10,000 years ago. It's commonly thought to have started somewhere in Asia, possibly in the Indus Valley area, which is around India and Pakistan, that area of the world. Early farming was thought to have been a very gradual process, and it's becoming. It started with people that were mainly hunter-gatherers as they started to slowly stick in one main area and then start to domesticate the crops and animals in that region. Their version of farming was very rudimentary, to say the least. It wasn't about around 5500 BC in the Middle East, that in the Fertile Crescent area, which is an area that spans across Egypt, Jordan, Palestine, Israel, Syria, Iraq, and in that general area. Farming was revolutionized by just basic advances in technology. And one of the big ones that really changed the game was irrigation. And you can see in the picture that I have up, this is just a small snippet of an example of the irrigation systems that they have in Petra. For those of you not familiar, it's one of the ancient cities in Jordan. But throughout Petra, and I've seen these, this isn't my picture, but this spans everywhere. And Petra is a city that's carved into the side of a mountain. And they have this irrigation system set up all across the city. So it starts at the top, like at the top of the mountains, and then it just goes everywhere. And they were able to redirect water to their plants, which kind of increased their productivity a whole lot. It changed their game. And since then, farming has been revolutionized. If we fast forward to the 1850s, during the Industrial Revolution, that's when farmers started to be introduced to things such as natural fertilizers and chemicals and pesticides. And this is, at least where I think personally, that farming started to dip its toes into the scientific world. It was around the 1900s that the tractor was invented. And this picture on the slide is a tractor from 1904, one of the first tractors. And it wasn't until between the 1930s and 60s that people adopted mechanical farming as a replacement to animal labor. So you saw more tractors and advancements there. But the science, this is where the science behind things like soil science and the fertilizers, pesticides, all that stuff started to come to. So I'm going to discuss a little bit about scientific farming and modern day farming. So the picture I have up here is an example of a vertical farm. So this is kind of farming at its the most productive farming basically that you can get. This is an example of one. They can get way more intense. As I was looking at pictures on Google, there were stations that had rows that they needed like a crane to get up just because it was that high. And a lot of these are computer controlled greenhouses and the environment is computer controlled. Some of them use hydroponics. I don't think this one does, but hydroponics is the idea of farming without soil, which that specifically is an example of the scientific understanding that we have of crops and plants and agriculture, that we can take them from where they have been for thousands of years and naturally, or the idea of naturally, and move them to a whole new environment inside, no need for the sun, just some water, and a good understanding of the science that goes behind it. Furthermore, we also have another example of the way science is mixed in with farming is like nutrition with animals. We have nutrition down to a science. There are nutrition degrees and PhDs all behind the nutrition of or the science of nutrition with farm animals. We can look at how nutritious certain plants are, if they provide more fiber than protein, fat, etc. And we can use it to customize feed to allow the animal to be the most productive that it possibly can. We also have a different understanding of nutrition science, or I'm sorry, of soil science. Science has opened up new doors there where we can analyze science or soil to see what crop it would be most effective with. We can look at pH levels, the different mineral content that it has, whether if it's sandy or loam or clay, different regions where that soil is, the different layers of soil. And we can use that then to maximize productivity with crops. And this is where you like on operations like the big cornfields that you see, or soy fields, or even trees. Nowadays, soil science is all a huge part of that and making that successful. And if you have too much of one element, corn won't work, but soy will. And if you have too much of another element, soy will work, but corn won't, etc. And those are just some of the things that the scientific backbones of farming. And now I'm going to discuss the artistic nature of farming. So as you can see in my picture here, this is an example of a rice field. Start with, there were a whole lot, many different themes. I just liked Star Wars, and that was pretty neat when I found it. But one of a quote that I found when I was doing my research for this project was, "The mattock, the dibble, the chainsaw are my paintbrushes and my chisel. My material is the land and the life that it supports, my medium, nature, my studio, open space." And I feel like that really applies to this rice field because it's like they've painted a picture. Some of them were even more in detail than the Star Wars one. Portraits of people, of sunsets, of different scenery. and like it showing expressions of people, and it was just like a painting or a portrait on a field, and they are pieces of work of art, artworks in my opinion. But I feel like although science or farming and agriculture has been broken down to a very scientific level of understanding, there are still many artistic properties that go with it. Another example of artistic farming, or the farming that or art that affects agriculture, is something like a crop circle, or and there's a lot of myths and urban legends around these about whether the source of them, but they got really popular in around the 70s, but there are a record of them back to the 1800s, and it's common in England, and you can see people go out and alter their fields to make different artworks or scenes. It's kind of similar to the rice art, but a little different. And a quote that I found was, "Farming is an art and not a formula." And as I was reading online, as I found this and I was reading about the crop circles, I decided to include this quote because as I was reading, it said that crop circles are starting to appear fewer and far between, mainly because it's not quite as, or the idea behind it isn't quite as pure as it used to be, meaning a lot of times now you can see crop circles or advertisements in fields. Different companies put in ads using the same techniques and kind of taking away the beauty of crop circles and what they used to be. And this, I think, was significant because as I was talking to a few friends of mine who are farmers and discussing, I asked them whether they thought farming was an art or a science, and they said that modern farming, large-scale farming to feed people with the way that the population is today is not an art. But farming for fun, farming things like something that takes handwork and it's more than just riding a tractor, that is artistic farming. Something that you need to really pour your blood, sweat, and tears into the land instead of just using a machine. Oftentimes, things like combines are actually just guided by I forgot the word in the last presentation. Satellites. So you use the satellite imagery and you kind of just sit in the combine and you go with it. But farming and from what I was able to gather, tree farming is widely regarded as more artistic than really any other form of farming. And that holds true to me because I have family back home in the Middle East. We have a grove of olive trees, and as growing up, when we would go back and visit, and my grandpa and I would go out and tend to the trees, I remember asking him why he personally didn't have people with machines come out and pick the olives instead of going through and picking hundreds of trees of olives by hand, walking up and down the rows for acres and acres. And he looked at me and he said, something that you need to realize is that life can move too fast, and that's especially, it carries through with the farming. If you don't get to know your trees and you don't know your land and you don't know what's growing here, you're not going to be an effective farmer, and you lose that aspect when you start to bring the machines in. And this is how you keep it pure. So I think that farming still is a combination of art and science. And I think for it to be the most successful it can be, it'll have to hold on to its artistic nature while incorporating scientific aspects to make it the most productive that it can. And that is all I have.
Thank you.
Thank our speaker. So what questions or comments do you have for our speaker.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
On the Star Wars thingy, how did they get all the different colors?
I don't know. I couldn't find very much info about it. I assume that they use different colored rice, and I don't know, but I wish I knew because it's pretty cool.
It is cool.
Yeah, it's probably a dye, and you can get dyes that are environmentally friendly. In fact, you get soy-based inks and dyes. They may have just applied that. You can see some of it though looks to be indentation. I think that's what they probably did. There is some indentation in there, but some of it is probably a dye that they're putting in there. Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Well, I guess so to ask our speaker, what do you think about that tension between industrialized farms and small farms to feed people versus farms that are more for pleasure or more as a hobby? What do you think that we've gone too far in the way of industrialized farming? Has the balance gone too far one way?
Yeah, I think the balance has tipped, but I think that we live in a time where the balance needs to tip, right? We have so many people in the world, and small scale farming isn't going to cut it. We're not going to be able to feed all the mouths that there are. There isn't a choice other than large scale farming, unfortunately. Not unfortunately, though. I think that while it would be great to say that all the big farms should cut back and let the little farms live or grow or whatever, it's not realistic in the time that with the population size that we have. I mean, food is a crisis, and people are. I went to a agriculture symposium leadership conference, I think last fall, and I was speaking to a representative from a pretty big ag company, and they said that their biggest issue is hunger and trying to find a way to fight hunger. And while it's great to look out for the little guy, if being the big guy means you can help everyone else, sometimes that's just what's going to happen.
What other comments or questions? I can keep talking.
I do have a comment. The presentation was well divided into one area, and then you made the statement that now I'm going to move on to this, and you included casual conversations with individuals to help support and give a different level of interest to the listener and to what you were saying. It was a good conversational piece, and it would have, I think, involved everybody in the room and the College of Business classrooms when we were there, or in the wherever we might have been for this actual presentation live. And it gave some interesting facts to the things that we don't usually realize about having the vertical farming. I've seen vertical farming, but I've not seen vertical farming to the extent that you need a crane to get to the top level. So how is it harvested? How do they produce it? Are those not hydroponic at that level? Is it soil? Doesn't that get to be very heavy?
Do you mind if I pull up a picture of it? Of some of the ones that I found of just the larger scale?
Sure, go for it.
Yes, that'd be fine.
I think there's clear applications here, not only in sustainability, but if the industry of sort of space exploration and in space sort of colonization, that's what a lot of people are working on, to say, how do you grow things on a spaceship or on a planet or a moon that you don't have the appropriate soil to do that? That's something that people are developing. The International Space Station has it's a working national lab. And so that's one thing that people are working on, is how do you grow things? How do you provide food in an environment like that?
All right, so this is one of the larger scale ones. Sorry.
And that's okay. I was just going to say in West Africa, for example, there's a lot of fruit that just goes to waste because no one knows how to take it and preserve it or to create it for a larger population. They just plow it under. There a lot of work is being done on how to build that into a better system of utilizing what's grown and how it's produced rather than waste.
So you can, this is one of the larger scale ones. There was one that I saw that they had the guy way up in the air, but you can see that little, the blue thing in the corner. I don't know exactly what the word for that is. Maybe a lift, but I think most of these are, I don't think most of these have soil. And I was reading online, or when I was reading online about it, there was a tutorial on how to do it yourself at home. And you can just get some PVC pipe, drill some holes and set it up. But it's pretty wild. I do imagine it would probably get pretty heavy, but I think they have this stuff down pat. They know what they're doing.
There are ways you don't need soil. Maybe you need some sort of medium, but you don't, or you just need water.
I think it's just water from what I was reading.
Kind of pump it through the nutrients and the water, but yeah, it's
What
interesting.
type of crops can you grow that way?
Mhm.
I know for sure lettuce. I don't know anything else off the top of my head, but I know for a fact lettuce. And you can buy kits to grow lettuce on like Amazon. Little hydroponic, like it's like you can put it on your desk. It's pretty small. You can grow a couple heads of lettuce at a time.
There used to be a hydroponic farm in Findlay. I don't know if it's still here, out near the reservoir. It was D.D. Lawrence's farm. He had a market, large acres that he sold vegetables in the summer. And then when he died, I think his son made it a hydroponic for tomatoes. Does that sound right, Khalil?
That could probably work. I'm not familiar with if there are any farms in Findlay, but I wouldn't doubt that.
I know there's a hydroponic like store over by off Tiffin. It's by was it Jedi's Bar and Grill or something. It's like in that little strip area. Like I almost didn't notice it, but it says hydroponic on the outside. I think it's a supply store.
Interesting application, yeah. Any other comments or questions? Let's
Khalil, have you shared this with your grandpa yet?
My grandpa unfortunately
shared your
passed
research
a few
for-
years ago. Otherwise, I would. Although it would be hard because of the language barrier, but I'm sure I would have been able to get it across.
yeah.
Well, I know he would be proud of you. It's
Thank
a good research
No.
and well presented.
Mhm.
Thank you. All right. I will.
Thank you. Well, we once again run out of time. So we will try to get as many folks as we can in next time. Maybe we'll stay on track. I knew there was a conversation about folks having exams and having to work and things like that, so we may have to prioritize. But I think if we hit the ground running, we should be able to get through more next time. But that's a good problem to have, right? Because we have interesting topics and we like to converse and whatnot. I think I also saw on the chat window that people would definitely be willing to meet during finals week, and no, I don't think so. But hopefully we'll kind of get through it. So I've got actually in that vein of sort of farming and art. If I can, I'll share one video just to try to finish things off. Let me go ahead and I'll share, and I think you'll really like this. So several years ago, I saw this CBS Sunday Morning about art growing chairs. I don't know if you've ever seen this before.
Elizabeth Palmer is our guide. Tuck Tucked into the green hills near the town of Wirksworth, there's a natural wonder. A 2-acre field where art meets enterprise.
This tree here,
It's the brainchild of Gavin Monroe.
this is our first row of chairs, started in 2012.
Yes, you heard that right. Chairs. A whole row of them growing up, each one a single willow tree.
And then once we know we're onto a winner, then we'll coppice them, which is kind of cutting them down in the winter, and then the new shoots that come out, we'll then train them.
Over time, he's refined his technique, shaping the trees on frames, carefully pruning and grafting. Is this the drying room?
This is the drawing room. So here's our first fully solid, undeniably sittable chair.
Can I sit in it?
Yeah, by all means, have a seat.
All right. A chair like this will sell for about $6,500.
Woo!
The sort of money you might put down.
That's above my pay grade, Dr. Loudon Haynes.
Oh, I do.
I feel like we should get some trees and grow some chairs.
It takes a long time.
No, this is our sort of showpiece.
The chairs,
Summer project, sure.
regular annual harvests will only start in 2022. But buyers seem happy to delivery up to 9 years.
For significant anniversaries, that kind of thing. So they've put in an order now.
And plans are underway to expand Full-Grown's product range.
This is our first dining table.
The experimenting never stops with tree varieties like these young sycamores. It's a science and a little bit of an art as well, with roots in the early 20th century, when John Krupsack, a banker from Wisconsin, grew a single chair out of multiple trees. Then later, California farmer Axel Erlandson coaxed his trees into all kinds of weird and wonderful shapes, and even opened a theme park.
He figured pretty much everything that we're trying to figure out, but he died without telling anyone how he did it. It definitely depends.
So
on
Gavin,
your
trained as a
price.
furniture maker,
Really
had to
could be
figure
a,
it out for
you know,
himself.
chair orchard.
And about 10 years ago, working in California with driftwood, he had a eureka moment.
Why don't we just grow the tree into the shape you want, cut it down, and start again?
Sounded so easy.
Yeah,
as
how
an
hard
idea.
could it be? Yeah.
Very hard.
And when this is upside down,
Take these knobbly coils. One day, they'll be lampshades.
well, we thought lampshades would be a kind of quick crop. And there's nothing quick with trees.
It turns out that when branches are forced to grow horizontally, they slow down. Hey, but at last, this one is ready for Hattie and Victoria to harvest. Could you have a table lamp with legs?
Well, let's cut it like that and see, shall we? Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. There is already a prototype in town. Anne Klein, a friend of Gavin's, was thrilled to hang this one of the very first in her dining room. Hopefully, we could one day think about having some chairs as well. Have you ever?
In another 10 years.
Oh, every morning. and then you come up and it's like, okay, we're all really lucky. This is about as nice as an office can get.
Yeah.
And then we're off again.
Gently, lovingly bending Mother Nature into shape.
All right. So now I've got big hopes. I got big dreams for Khalil now. So I want some of those chairs. I want those chairs. I want to go in and I want to be able to get my chairs and my dining room table and everything. And it'll only take me 30 years to get them, right?
You guys
So
will have the first prototype.
really neat application of art and science, but man, the patience that you'd have to do to be able to grow those. And I think about that like your own Leonardo masterpiece. If you make a mistake, you've ruined, years of work on that. So, but a lot of trial and error and a lot of science as well in there. So anyway, yeah, so it'd be interesting. Yeah, you kind of saw them too. They were going through and testing different types of trees and what works the best. And they probably have things like what type of soil, how much sunlight, what type of nutrients and things like that that would actually work. But yeah, it was interesting too to hear that unfortunately the one of the pioneers of this didn't tell anyone how to do it. So they had to kind of rediscover it or kind of figure that out for themselves. So yeah, but that's a really neat application. But anyway, that's what came to mind when I heard farming as an art and a science. Functional too. There's some engineering and design in there as well. So lots to think about there. So anyway, but I'm not sure I have the cash for one of those chairs. So anyway, but Andy, England's doing it right. You should be proud. They know how to build some chairs. Anyway, well, like I said, we'll continue our presentations on Thursday, and we'll promise not to talk quite as much. Well, maybe we shouldn't promise. Maybe a class gift for me. I'll accept. Thanks, Lauren. I appreciate that. Sounds like Lauren is gonna pool all the money together from the students in class, and they're gonna get myself and Dr. Loudon Haynes a chair each. That's very generous of you. I appreciate it. So thanks. There goes our. Well, you know, what's a couple $1,000s between friends, right? So it's just a few $1,000. So I think you all are good for it. Anyway, well, thanks again. Like I said, interesting conversation. I think our speakers did a great job today, and like I said, it's a testament to the interesting topics that you all. That's why we get off track on our little rabbit holes. But anyway,
and it was exciting to hear the first
like I said, we
presentation.
haven't forgotten about distributing these videos as well. So we'll have to get someone on this to kind of edit them a little bit and make sure that we can send them out so everyone can see. So we want to send these, especially Dr. Fell, right? So we'll get those out to all the most important people on campus. So anyway.
I know there was an email that got sent out about.
That's right. So anyway, well, like I said, see everyone on Thursday. Looking forward to more presentations, and thanks to all of you that presented today. Save your money for those tree chairs.
Dr. Tice. Can you hear me?
See you later.